I'm Tatum, 27 years old, and I never thought driving 6 hours from Charlotte to Asheville for Christmas would land me in what I can only call a family nightmare. After a year of dodging drama like it was my full-time job, I was actually excited to come home. Picture me blasting holiday tunes, sipping gas station coffee, dreaming of Mom's pecan pie. But the second I hauled my suitcase through the front door of our cozy little Asheville house, that warm fuzzy feeling shattered like a cheap ornament. There he was, Ezra, my ex-boyfriend, the guy who cheated on me with his coworker, and then had the guts to call it a misunderstanding. He was sprawled on the couch, grinning next to the twinkling Christmas tree like he owned the place. My jaw hit the floor so hard I'm surprised it didn't crack the hardwood. Mom Maris, bless her naive heart, rushed over, her apron still dusted with flour, and chirped, "Oh, Tatum, look who surprised us. Ezra's joining us for Christmas." Joining us? I blinked, waiting for the punchline, but none came. Dad, Kalen, didn't even look up from his newspaper. He just grunted and slapped Ezra on the shoulder like they were old fishing buddies. "Good to have you, son," he said, his voice gruff and final, the way it always is when he's decided something's not up for debate. I stood there frozen, my coat still zipped up, feeling like I'd just been tossed into some twisted Christmas horror flick. Think Home Alone meets the 09 Krampus asterisk vibes. Ezra caught my eye and flashed that smug, lopsided grin I used to fall for, back when I was too dumb to see through his act. "Hey, Tatum," he said, all casual like he hadn't ripped my heart out 18 months ago. "Missed you." Missed me? I wanted to hurl my suitcase at his head. Instead, I dropped it with a thud and managed, "What the hell are you doing here?" My voice came out sharper than I meant, but honestly I was past caring. Mom flinched like I'd slapped her, her hands fluttering to her chest. "Tatum, don't be rude. Ezra's part of the family. He didn't have anywhere else to go for the holidays." Part of the family? I nearly choked. This was the guy who'd lied to my face for months, who'd made me question my sanity while he was sneaking around. And now he's family? I glanced at Dad, hoping for backup, but he just folded his paper and gave me that look, the one that says, "Don't start trouble." I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears, every festive light in the room suddenly too bright, too mocking. Mom bustled over to Ezra, handing him a mug of cider like he was some prodigal son returned. "We couldn't leave him alone for Christmas," she said, her tone all syrupy sympathy. "He's been so sweet, checking in on us ever since you two." Well, you know. Oh, I knew. I knew exactly how he'd wormed his way back into their good graces, probably with his sob stories and crocodile tears. Meanwhile, I'm standing there, the actual daughter, feeling like a stranger in my own house. I sucked in a breath, trying to keep it together. "So let me get this straight," I said, my words clipped. "You invited my ex, the guy who cheated on me, to spend Christmas with us and didn't think to mention it?" Mom's face crumpled, her big doe eyes welling up. "Tatum, honey, don't make a scene. It's the holidays. Can't you let bygones be bygones?" Bygones? I wanted to scream. This wasn't some petty spat. This was betrayal, served up with a side of holiday cheer. Ezra leaned back, sipping his cider, that smirk still plastered on his face like he was enjoying every second of this. Dad finally piped up, his voice low and commanding. "Enough, Tatum. Sit down and eat. We're not doing this tonight." I stared at them, Mom wringing her hands, Dad glaring like I'm the problem, Ezra lounging there like a king. The room felt too small, the air too thick with pine scent and unspoken lies. "Are you guys serious right now?" I asked, my voice shaking. Mom sighed, all dramatic. "Tatum, stop being so selfish. Ezra's here now. Let's make the best of it." Selfish? The word hit me like a punch. I couldn't believe it, my own parents picking him over me, their daughter, without a second thought. My chest burned, a mix of rage and hurt bubbling up so fast I could barely breathe. I wanted to flip the damn table, smash every twinkling light, but instead I grabbed my suitcase and stormed upstairs. "Fine," I spat over my shoulder. "Enjoy your perfect little family." The stairs creaked under my boots as I climbed, my mind racing. How could they do this? How could they choose him? After everything. I slammed my bedroom door shut, the sound echoing through the house, and sank onto the bed. Outside, snowflakes swirled against the window, soft and silent, mocking the chaos churning inside me. This was supposed to be my Christmas, my safe haven, and now it's a battlefield. And the worst part? I've got no idea how I'm going to survive the next few days with that snake under the same roof. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning under the quilt Mom made me when I was 10. The one with little snowflakes stitched into every square. Every creak of the old Asheville house felt like a taunt, a reminder that Ezra was downstairs, probably smirking in his sleep. By the time the sun peeked through the frost-covered window, I was already a wreck, puffy eyes, tangled hair, and a knot in my stomach that wouldn't quit. But I dragged myself out of bed anyway. Hiding up here wasn't going to make him disappear. Downstairs, the smell of coffee hit me first, warm and bitter, cutting through the pine-scented air. I shuffled into the kitchen, bracing myself, and there he was, Ezra, leaning against the counter like he'd lived here forever. He was pouring Mom a cup of coffee with that slow, deliberate charm, his flannel shirt rolled up just enough to look effortlessly perfect. It was disgusting how good he was at this, like a wolf dressed up as Santa, all twinkly eyes and hidden claws. "Morning, Tatum," he said, voice smooth as honey, not even glancing my way as he handed Mom the mug. Mom beamed at him, her cheeks rosy from the heat of the stove. "Oh, Ezra, you're such a dear. Tatum, why can't you be this thoughtful?" I bit my tongue so hard I tasted metal. Thoughtful? This was the guy who'd ghosted me for weeks while he was busy cozying up to someone else. I grabbed a mug for myself, hands shaky, and muttered, "Guess I didn't get the memo that we're running a halfway house for exes now." She didn't even hear me or didn't want to. She was too busy giggling at something Ezra whispered, like they were in on some private joke. I slammed the coffee pot down harder than I meant to, the clank echoing off the cabinets. That got his attention. He turned, locking eyes with me, and there it was, that flicker of triumph, quick as a snake's tongue, before he plastered on that innocent puppy dog look. "Tatum," he said, stepping closer. "I know this is weird, but I still feel bad about how things ended. I miss us." "Miss us?" I nearly laughed in his face. "You mean you miss having someone to lie to?" I shot back, my voice low but sharp enough to cut through the cozy little scene. Mom spun around, spatula in hand, her face twisting into that disappointed frown I knew too well. "Tatum, stop it. Ezra's been nothing but honest since you two split. He told us everything, how he messed up, how sorry he is." "Honest?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Oh, he told you everything, huh?" I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter to keep from lunging at him. Did he mention the part where I caught him texting his coworker, "I love you," while we were still together? Or how he said I was crazy when I called him out? My chest tightened just saying it, the memory slicing through me like a fresh wound. Ezra didn't even flinch. He just sighed, all dramatic, and ran a hand through his stupid perfect hair. "I owned up to that, Tatum. I was in a bad place back then. I've changed." Changed? The only thing that had changed was how good he'd gotten at playing the victim. Mom nodded along like he'd just recited scripture, her eyes soft and trusting. "See? He's trying. Why can't you let it go? It's Christmas, for heaven's sake." I stared at her, my own mother, picking his side without a second thought. It wasn't just disbelief anymore, it was something heavier, like a stone sinking in my gut. "Let it go," I echoed, my voice cracking. "He cheated on me, Mom. He broke me. And you're acting like I'm the bad guy for not throwing him a parade." She waved me off, flipping a pancake with a huff. "People make mistakes, Tatum. You're too hard on him. He's practically family." Practically family. There it was again, that phrase that made my skin crawl. I glanced at Ezra and he met my gaze, unflinching, his lips twitching just enough to let me know he was loving this. He'd won her over, hook, line, and sinker, and I hadn't even seen it coming. How long had he been working on this? Months? Longer? The kitchen felt like it was closing in, the cheery red curtains and twinkling lights mocking me with their fake warmth. I couldn't take it anymore. I shoved my mug onto the counter, coffee sloshing over the edge, and turned to leave. "You know what? Enjoy your little fantasy world," I snapped, my voice trembling with everything I was holding back. Mom called after me, "Tatum, don't be so dramatic." But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not with him standing there, basking in his victory. Back in my room, I collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling as my mind spun. This wasn't just about Christmas anymore. He wasn't here by accident, he'd planned this, weaseled his way back in, turned my own family against me. I could still see that smug glint in his eyes, like he knew I was powerless. And the worst part? He was right. I'd lost the first round without even throwing a punch. My hands curled into fists, nails digging into my palms. He might have fooled them, but I wasn't done yet. The question gnawing at me wouldn't let go. What the hell does he want? That question, what does he want? Clawed at me all day, a splinter I couldn't pull out. I stayed holed up in my room as long as I could, scrolling my phone, pretending the muffled laughter from downstairs didn't sting. But there's no hiding from Christmas dinner. Not in this house. Mom's voice eventually floated up the stairs, bright and insistent, calling me down to join the family. I dragged myself to the dining room, each step heavier than the last, knowing I was walking into a lion's den with no armor. The table was a picture-perfect spread, golden turkey, cranberry sauce glistening like rubies, candles flickering in the dim light. But the real centerpiece was Ezra, parked right across from me, chatting away like he'd been carved into this family portrait years ago. Mom hung on his every word, laughing at some dumb story about his new job, while Dad nodded along, his rare smile reserved for the guy who'd once broken his daughter's heart. I sat there, picking at my plate, the turkey tasting like ash in my mouth. It was like I'd become a ghost trapped in my own home, invisible unless I rattled some chains. Chew ahead, the whole scene got worse. Ezra leaned back in his chair, all relaxed confidence, and started passing dishes around, offering Mom the mashed potatoes, scooping stuffing onto Dad's plate. Everyone ate it up, figuratively and literally, their eyes sparkling with admiration. I tried to join in, mentioning a project I'd nailed at work, but Mom just gave me a distracted, "That's nice, honey," before turning back to Ezra's tale about rescuing a stray cat or some nonsense. My fork clattered against the plate, louder than I meant, but no one noticed. They were too busy clapping for his one-man show. Then came the real gut punch. Mom stood up, her face glowing with that proud mama look I hadn't seen since I graduated high school. She disappeared into the living room and came back holding a small, wrapped box tied with a red ribbon. My heart lifted for a split second. I'd begged her for months to knit me one of her handmade sweaters, the kind she used to make when I was little. She set the box in front of Ezra. "This is for you," she said, her voice dripping with affection. "You deserve it more than anyone." I froze, my breath catching like I'd been dunked in ice water. Ezra unwrapped it, pulling out a soft gray sweater, the exact one I'd described to her. Cable knit, cozy, perfect. "Maris, this is incredible," he gushed, holding it up like a trophy. Dad grunted his approval, and Mom practically preened. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I shoved my chair back, the screech cutting through their little love fest, and stood up. "Are you kidding me?" I demanded, my voice shaking so hard it barely sounded like mine. "That was supposed to be mine. You all chose him over me." The room went dead quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. Mom's face crumpled, her hands twisting the hem of her apron. "Tatum, don't make this about you," she said, soft but firm. "Ezra's been through a lot. I thought you'd understand." Understand? My vision blurred, hot tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. Dad didn't even look at me, just stabbed his fork into his turkey and muttered, "Sit down and act your age. We're not ruining dinner over this." Ruin dinner? I wanted to flip the table, send the whole damn feast crashing to the floor, but my legs wouldn't move. Ezra, of course, seized the moment. He reached across the table, his hand hovering near mine, all fake concern. "Hey Tatum, I didn't mean to upset you," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, his tone so syrupy it made my stomach churn. "Let's just enjoy the night, okay?" Mom nodded like he just solved world peace, and Dad shot me a glare that said, "Drop it." I couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were tilting inward, the candlelight flickering like it was laughing at me. I didn't say another word, just turned and bolted out the front door, the cold December air hitting me like a slap. Snow crunched under my boots as I stumbled onto the porch, my breath puffing out in ragged clouds. I sank onto the steps, tears spilling down my cheeks, freezing before they could hit the ground. Inside, I could still hear their voices, Mom's gentle coaxing, Ezra's smooth lies, carrying on like nothing happened, like I didn't matter. How much more of this could I take? I don't know how long I sat there on the porch steps, the cold seeping through my jeans, turning my legs numb. The tears had stopped, but the ache in my chest hadn't, sharp and relentless, like a splinter lodged too deep to dig out. The snow kept falling silent and steady, blanketing the yard in a way that should have felt peaceful but didn't. It just made everything quieter, lonelier, amplifying the hum of voices still drifting from inside, Mom's soft chatter, Ezra's fake laugh. I hugged my knees, wondering if I could just stay out here forever, let the frost swallow me whole. The front door creaked open behind me, a sliver of warm light spilling across the snow. I didn't turn around, figured it'd be Mom with another guilt trip or Dad barking at me to come inside. But then I heard the shuffle of sneakers, hesitant and familiar, and Soren's voice cut through the chill. "Tatum? You okay?" My little brother, 25, gangly, with that mop of dark hair he never bothers to tame, stood there, a steaming mug of cocoa in his hands. He held it out to me, his eyes soft with something I hadn't seen from anyone else in this house: worry. I took the mug, the heat stinging my frozen fingers, and managed a weak, "Not really." He plopped down beside me, close enough that our shoulders brushed, and for a minute we just sat there watching the snow pile up. It was like finding a lighthouse in the middle of a blizzard, unexpected, fragile, but enough to keep me from sinking completely. Soren fidgeted with the zipper on his hoodie, then finally said, "I hate him too. You know, Ezra. He's a creep." That caught me off guard. I turned to him, the cocoa sloshing a little in my grip. "Wait, you do? Then why haven't you said anything?" His face twisted, a mix of guilt and frustration. "I tried once back when he first started calling Mom, but Dad shut me down, said I was stirring trouble. You know how they get, Ezra's the golden boy and I'm just me." His voice trailed off, bitter but quiet, and I realized how much he'd been drowning in this mess too. Chua, what he said next hit me like a brick. "He's been at this for months, Tatum. 6, maybe more. Keeps texting Mom, dropping by with little gifts, acting like he's so worried about you. Said you abandoned him after the breakup, that he's been a wreck." Soren snorted, kicking at a clump of snow. "Total bullshit, but they ate it up. Dad even told me Ezra's more reliable than us." I stared at him, my mind racing to piece it together. 6 months. That slimy jerk had been weaving this web while I was in Charlotte, clueless, thinking I'd left him behind for good. The mug trembled in my hands, cocoa splashing onto my sleeve, but I barely noticed. "He's been playing them this whole time." I whispered, more to myself than Soren. It wasn't just about crashing Christmas, he'd been laying the groundwork, turning my own family into his personal fan club. The betrayal stung fresh all over again, but something else sparked too. A flicker of fight I hadn't felt since I walked through that door yesterday. I set the mug down, my jaw tightening. "I'm not letting him get away with this." Soren glanced at me, his eyes wide but curious. "What are you gonna do?" I didn't have a plan, not yet, but the wheels were turning, grinding through the haze of hurt. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice steadier than it had been all night. "But I'm done sitting here feeling sorry for myself. He doesn't get to win." A small crooked smile tugged at Soren's lips, the first real one I'd seen from him since I got here. "Good. 'Cause I'm sick of watching him strut around like he owns us." I nodded, the cold air suddenly feeling less suffocating, more like a challenge. "We're in this together then?" I asked, locking eyes with him. He didn't hesitate, just bumped his fist against mine. A quiet promise sealed in the snow. "Yeah. Whatever you do, I've got your back." That was it, my lifeline, my one ally in this twisted holiday wreck. I stood up, brushing the ice off my jeans, a new resolve settling into my bones. Ezra might have fooled everyone else, but he wasn't ready for us. Not yet. Standing there in the snow with Soren, that fist bump still tingling in my knuckles, I felt something shift, like a switch flipping from helpless to hellbent. We didn't waste time trading more words outside. The cold was biting harder, and I needed to move before that spark fizzled out. I jerked my head toward the door, and he followed me back inside, our boots leaving wet tracks across the hardwood. The house was quieter now, the clatter of dishes fading, but I could still feel Ezra's presence lurking like a bad smell you can't shake. Up in my room, I locked the door and yanked my phone from my pocket, my fingers moving fast. "We need proof," I muttered, more to myself than Soren, as I scrolled through old messages, digital scars from a breakup I tried to bury. There they were, buried in a folder I hadn't touched in months. Screenshots of Ezra's text to his coworker, all flirty and blatant, time-stamped while we were still together. It was like flipping open a dusty old book I'd sworn never to read again. Except this time, I was the one holding the pen. I sent them to Soren's phone with a quick ping, his screen lighting up as he leaned against my desk, brows furrowed. "These are gold," he said, zooming in on one. A nauseating "can't wait to see you tonight" babe Ezra had sent her while I was cooking him dinner. My stomach twisted, but not like before. This wasn't pain, it was fuel. I paced the room, the floorboards creaking under me, my mind racing to figure out how to use this. Mom needs to see it, I decided, stopping mid-step. She keeps saying he's changed. Let's shove the truth in her face. The Roy I marched downstairs, Soren trailing behind like a shadow, clutching his phone like a lifeline. Mom was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter, humming some carol under her breath. The normalcy of it almost threw me off, like she hadn't just handed my sweater to my ex a couple hours ago. "Mom," I said, my voice cutting through her tune. She turned, her smile faltering when she saw my face. I held up my phone, the screenshot glaring bright. "This is who Ezra really is. Look at it." Her eyes flicked to the screen, then away, quick as a flinch. She set the rag down, crossing her arms tight. "Tatum, why are you digging this up? Everyone messes up sometimes. You're too rigid. Holding on to grudges won't fix anything." Her words landed like a slap, but softer, more pitying, and that made it worse. I swiped to another message, shoving it closer. "This isn't a mess-up, Mom. He was cheating on me, lying to my face, and you're welcoming him like some saint." She sighed, long and tired, and brushed past me to grab a glass from the cabinet. "He's apologized, honey. People grow. You should too." I stood there, phone still raised, my arm starting to ache, but it was nothing compared to the hollow thud in my chest. She wasn't going to see it, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to. I lowered my hand, the screen going dark, and glanced at Soren. He gave me a small, helpless shrug, his jaw tight. "Din dim la" when Ezra poked his head in, that smug grin curling his lips like he'd smelled blood in the water. "Everything okay in here?" he asked, all faux innocence, leaning against the doorway. Mom perked up instantly, waving him in. "Oh, just Tatum being dramatic again. Come help me with the dishes, sweetie." He shot me a look, sharp, victorious, like he knew he'd dodged another bullet, and sauntered over to her side. I turned away, my nails digging into my palms, the urge to scream clawing up my throat. Back in my room, I slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. Soren slipping in behind me. "She's blind," I hissed, pacing again, my voice low but venomous. "He's got her wrapped around his finger, and Dad's no better." Soren nodded, sinking onto my bed, his hands clasped tight. "They're not gonna listen to us, not like this." He was right, and that truth settled over me like a heavy coat, but instead of crushing me, it sharpened my edges. I stopped pacing, locking eyes with him. "Then we don't just tell them. We show them. Force them to see who he really is." My pulse kicked up, a wild, reckless rhythm, but it felt good, like I was finally steering this runaway train. Soren tilted his head, a glint of mischief breaking through his usual quiet. "How?" I didn't have all the answers yet, but I leaned in close, dropping my voice to a whisper. "If they won't believe us now, we'll make them see it with their own eyes. Game on." He grinned, small but fierce, and I knew we were locked in for whatever came next. Game on wasn't just a throwaway line, it was a promise, and I wasn't about to let it fizzle. Back in my room, with Soren still perched on the bed scrolling through those damning screenshots, I grabbed my phone again, my fingers itching to dig deeper. If Mom wouldn't listen to the past, maybe the present would shake her awake. I shot a quick text to Jess, an old friend from Charlotte who'd always had a knack for sniffing out gossip. "Hey, you still talk to anyone from Ezra's office? Need dirt ASAP." Her reply buzzed in minutes later, and I swear my heart skipped when I read it. "Girl, he's been cozying up to that same chick, Lila, from the breakup. Saw them at a bar last night, all over each other." Last night. The night before he rolled into Asheville with that sob story about being alone for Christmas. It was like tugging a loose thread and watching a whole tapestry of lies start to unravel. I screenshotted her message, my hands trembling, not from anger this time, but from the thrill of catching him red-handed. "Soren," I said, tossing him the phone. "Look at this." He squinted at the screen, then let out a low whistle. "So he's still a sleaze. Figures." His voice had an edge sharper than usual, and I could tell he was as fed up as I was. I paced the room again, but this time it wasn't frantic, it was purposeful like a hunter circling prey. "He's playing everyone," I said, my mind spinning with possibilities. "We've got pics now, fresh ones. Let's see them brush this off." The Roy, I stormed downstairs, Soren at my heels, clutching the new evidence like a loaded gun. Mom and Dad were in the living room, lounging by the fireplace, the crackling logs casting a warm glow that felt all wrong for what was coming. Ezra was nowhere in sight, probably off perfecting his halo somewhere. I didn't waste time with small talk. "You need to see this," I said, thrusting my phone at Mom. The photo of Ezra and Lila glowing bright, him with his arm around her laughing into his shoulder. Mom barely glanced at it before pushing the phone back at me. "Tatum, stop it. They're just friends. You're reading too much into things." Her tone was dismissive, like I was a kid throwing a tantrum over spilled milk. I turned to Dad, hoping for a crack in his armor, but he just folded his arms, his face carved from stone. "Looks innocent to me," he grunted. "You've got too much time on your hands stirring up trouble." I stood there, rooted to the spot, the phone heavy in my hand. Innocent. The word burned, twisting something fierce inside me. "This was last night," I pressed, my voice rising despite myself. "He's here playing victim while he's out with her. How's that innocent?" Mom sighed, rubbing her temples like I was the one exhausting her. "People hang out, Tatum. You're jealous, and it's clouding your judgment." "Jealous?" I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat, bitter and jagged. Soren stepped up beside me, his fists clenched, but before he could say anything, Dad cut in. "Enough. Drop it, both of you. We're not doing this again." His voice was final, a door slamming shut, and I knew arguing was pointless. They built a fortress around Ezra, and I was just banging on the walls. "Chew ahead." The rail kicker came when I heard footsteps behind me. Ezra sauntered in, hands in his pockets, that easy grin plastered on his face. "What's all the fuss?" he asked, like he hadn't just waltzed through a minefield. Mom perked up, patting the couch beside her. "Nothing, sweetie. Just a misunderstanding." He slid into the spot, shooting me a glance, quick, smug, like a cat that had caught the canary. I turned away, my pulse hammering, every nerve screaming to wipe that look off his face. Back upstairs, I flung myself onto the bed, staring at the ceiling as Soren hovered by the window, tapping his foot. "They're hopeless," I muttered, the words tasting sour. "Pics, texts, none of it matters. They'll twist anything to keep him shiny." Soren nodded, his jaw tight. "So what now?" I sat up, a new idea sparking, bright and dangerous. "We've been playing defense. Time to switch it up." I leaned forward, my voice dropping low. "He's too good at covering his tracks when we call him out. So we set him up instead. Let him trip over his own lies." Soren's eyes lit up, a slow grin spreading. "Like a trap." I nodded, the plan taking shape, rough but solid. "Exactly. We've got proof he's a fake, but they won't see it unless he shows them himself." My chest buzzed with a strange electric calm. Risky, sure, but it was ours. Only one way to do this right. Make Ezra expose his own mask. Making Ezra expose himself wasn't just a plan, it was a tightrope, and I was about to walk it with no net. After Soren and I hashed out the basics, I spent the next few hours locked in my room, plotting every move like a chess player facing a grandmaster. The house had settled into a deceptive calm, the kind that hums before a storm, and I knew my window was narrow. I slipped downstairs, Soren trailing me with a nod, both of us silent as we braced for the gamble. The living room was aglow with string lights, the tree casting long shadows across the rug. Mom and Dad were on the couch, sipping mulled wine, while Ezra lounged in an armchair, flipping through a magazine like he was posing for a holiday ad. I took a deep breath, plastering a smile on my face that felt more like a mask than skin, and stepped into the light. "Hey everyone," I said, my voice steady despite the churn in my gut. "I've been thinking maybe I've been too harsh. Ezra, can we just start over?" Mom's eyes lit up, her glass pausing mid-sip. "Oh Tatum, that's so mature of you." Dad grunted something that might have been approval, his gaze flicking between us. Ezra set the magazine down, slow and deliberate, his grin spreading like oil on water. "I'd like that," he said, leaning forward, all earnest charm. "Means a lot, Tatum." It was like baiting a starving alligator, dangerous, but I could see the hunger in his eyes, the belief he'd won me over too. The Roy, I sat beside him, close enough to feel the heat off his flannel, my phone tucked in my pocket with the recorder app already running. I kept my tone light, tossing out small talk about the snow, the food stuff that had bore anyone but kept the room relaxed. Mom beamed, chattering about how nice it was to see us getting along, while Dad sank deeper into the cushions, content to let the moment play out. Soren lingered by the tree, pretending to adjust an ornament, his eyes darting to me every few seconds. The setup was perfect, now I just needed Ezra to bite. I nudged him, dropping my voice like we were sharing a secret. "You've really got them wrapped around your finger, huh?" I said, nodding toward Mom and Dad. His guard slipped just a crack, but I saw it, that flicker of pride he couldn't hide. He chuckled, low and smug, leaning in. "Yeah, took some work, but they're easy once you know the buttons to push." My pulse spiked, the phone burning a hole in my pocket, but I kept my face neutral, egging him on with a little laugh. Din diem la when Soren wandered over, casual as anything, and I gave him the signal, a quick tilt of my head. He jumped in, playing dumb. "Man, Ezra, how'd you even get back in here after everything?" Ezra took the bait, his voice dipping into that cocky drawl I knew too well. "It's simple, kid," he said, glancing at me like I was part of the punchline. "A few calls, some sob stories, Maris eats it up. And Tatum? She'll never get out from under me. I've got this family locked down." He tapped his temple, grinning like a fox in a henhouse, oblivious to the trap snapping shut. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from reacting, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he'd hear it. The recorder caught every word, every slimy, arrogant syllable, and I could have kissed Soren for playing his part so well. He just nodded wide-eyed, then shuffled back to the tree, leaving Ezra basking in his own glow. I stood up, stretching like nothing had happened, and excused myself to grab some water. Mom called after me, "See? Isn't this nice?" And I forced a, "Yeah, real nice," over my shoulder, my legs trembling as I hit the stairs. In my room, I yanked the phone out and stopped the recording, my breath hitching as I replayed it. There it was, Ezra's voice, clear as day, bragging about his game, admitting I'd never escape his grip. Soren slipped in behind me, shutting the door soft as a whisper. "Did it work?" he asked, his voice tight with anticipation. I hit play again, letting the words fill the space, and his jaw dropped. "Holy crap, Tatum. That's it. That's everything." I clutched the phone, my knuckles white, a rush of adrenaline flooding through me like a dam breaking. This wasn't just proof, it was a weapon, sharp and loaded, ready to blow his whole act apart. But we weren't done. I met Soren's eyes, my voice barely above a hiss. "This'll shake them, but it's not enough to just play it. We've got one shot to nail him in front of everyone." My mind raced, piecing together the final move. "Chew a het, we need him to confess where they can't ignore it. I've got to make him spill it all, right in their faces." Getting Ezra to confess in front of everyone wasn't just the next step, it was the end game, and I wasn't backing down. After Soren and I locked in that recording, I didn't waste a second. I marched downstairs, the phone gripped tight in my hand, and called out to the house with a voice that didn't shake, even though my insides were a mess. "Hey everyone, can we sit down for a minute? I've got something to say." Mom poked her head out from the kitchen, curious but wary, while Dad shuffled in from the garage, wiping grease off his hands. Ezra trailed in last, all relaxed swagger, like he thought this was just another round he'd win. We gathered in the living room, the same spot where I'd played nice hours ago. But this time the air felt charged, brittle, ready to snap. I stood by the fireplace, the heat licking at my back, and faced them, Mom on the couch, Dad in his armchair, Ezra leaning against the wall with that infuriating smirk. Soren hovered near me, a silent anchor, his presence steadying me as I started. "I've tried talking, showing you proof, but it's not enough," I said, my tone even but firm. "So let's clear the air, all of us right now." Mom frowned, setting her tea down. "Tatum, what's this about?" I didn't answer her, not with words. Instead, I pulled out my phone, thumbed to the recording, and hit play. Ezra's voice spilled out, crisp and damning, like dropping a bomb into the room and watching the shrapnel fly. "A few calls, some sob stories, Maris eats it up. And Tatum? She'll never get out from under me. I've got this family locked down." Every word echoed off the walls, louder than the crackling fire, and I watched their faces shift, Mom's eyes widening, Dad's jaw tightening, Ezra's grin vanishing like smoke. The Roy chaos broke loose. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, the tea mug wobbling on the table. "Ezra, is that you?" she stammered, her voice small, cracking. Dad leaned forward, his knuckles whitening on the armrests, staring at Ezra like he was seeing him for the first time. I kept my eyes on the snake himself. His cool facade crumbled, replaced by a flash of panic as he straightened up. "That's not, it's edited, she set me up," he blurted, pointing at me, his voice pitching higher than I'd ever heard it. I didn't flinch. "Set you up?" I shot back, stepping closer, the phone still in my hand like a loaded gun. "You said it yourself, Ezra. You bragged about it right here to Soren. Want to hear it again?" I waved the device, daring him, and he faltered, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping on dry land. Soren stepped up beside me, arms crossed, his silence louder than any accusation. The room felt like it was holding its breath, every tick of the clock a hammer strike. Din diem la when Dad stood up, slow and deliberate, his shadow stretching across the rug. "Get out," he said, his voice low, gravelly, the kind of command that didn't need volume to cut deep. Ezra blinked like he couldn't process it, then turned to Mom, desperate. "Maris, come on, you know me." But she was already crying, her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking as the truth sank in. "Just go," she whispered, barely audible, and that was it, the final crack in his crumbling castle. He grabbed his coat off the rack, movements jerky, his eyes darting between us like a cornered animal. "You're all insane," he spat, yanking the door open, letting a gust of icy air flood in. "She's lying and you'll see it." But no one moved to stop him. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound ringing in my ears, and I watched through the window as his figure shrank into the snowy dark, swallowed by the night. My legs gave out then and I sank onto the hearth, the phone slipping from my grip. Soren crouched beside me, his hand on my shoulder, while Mom's sobs filled the silence and Dad stared at the floor, fists still clenched. I'd done it, he was gone, but the victory felt hollow, a strange mix of relief and emptiness washing over me. What now? That hollow mix of relief and emptiness clung to me like damp fog, even after Ezra's taillights vanished into the night. The living room stayed heavy with silence long after he left, Mom's quiet sobs, Dad's stiff posture, Soren's hand still resting on my shoulder. I didn't sleep much, just lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every word of that recording in my head, wondering if winning was supposed to feel this brittle. By the time the sun crept through the blinds, painting thin gold stripes across the floor, I was already up, pulling on my boots, needing to face whatever came next. Downstairs, the house felt different, quieter, but not peaceful, like the calm after a storm that's wrecked everything in its path. Mom was in the kitchen, her eyes red-rimmed, stirring a pot of oatmeal no one would eat. She looked up when I walked in, her face crumpling again, and before I could brace myself, she crossed the room and pulled me into a hug. "Tatum, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice thick with regret. "I didn't know, I should have listened to you." Her arms were warm, familiar, but I stood stiff, unable to melt into it like I used to. I pulled back, meeting her gaze, my throat tight but steady. "I needed you to see it months ago, Mom. Not just now when he's gone." Her hands fell to her sides, trembling, and she nodded, tears spilling over again. "I messed up, honey. I thought he was good for us, for you." The words stung, not because they were new but because they were so late. I wanted to forgive her, to let it all slide, but something inside me wouldn't budge, not yet. "I need time," I said, soft but firm, and turned away, leaving her standing there with the oatmeal steaming uselessly behind her. The Roy, Dad came in from the back porch, his boots thudding heavy on the floor, his face still set in that stubborn mask I knew too well. He didn't look at me, just grabbed a mug and poured coffee, the silence between us thick as tar. I couldn't let it sit. "You still think I overreacted?" I asked, leaning against the counter, my voice low but pointed. He took a slow sip, then set the mug down, his eyes finally meeting mine, cold, unyielding. "You didn't have to blow it up like that," he said. "Ezra wasn't perfect, but he didn't deserve that circus." I stared at him, disbelief curling in my chest like smoke. "He played you, both of you, and you're still defending him?" My hands clenched at my sides, but I kept my tone even, refusing to give him the fight he expected. He shrugged, turning back to his coffee. You made your point. Doesn't mean I like how you did it. That was it, his line in the sand, and I realized then he'd never cross it, not for me. The sting was sharp, but it wasn't new, and I was done begging for scraps of understanding. Chew ahead, the breaking point came when I saw my suitcase still sitting by the stairs, untouched since I'd stormed up here that first night. I grabbed it, the weight of it grounding me, and hauled it to the living room where Soren was sprawled on the couch, scrolling his phone. He sat up when he saw me, eyebrows lifting. You're leaving? I nodded, dropping the bag at my feet. I can't stay here, not after this. If they'd rather cling to him than see me, I'm out. My voice cracked, but I held it together, feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, not to fall but to leap. Soren got up, stepping closer, his expression serious but warm. Then I'm with you. We'll do Christmas in Charlotte our way, no bullshit. His words hit me like a lifeline, pulling me back from the brink of doubt. I managed a small smile, the first real one in days. Deal. Mom appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide, pleading. Tatum, don't go, please, let's fix this. But I shook my head, zipping up my coat. I'm not cutting you off, Mom. I just can't keep pretending this works. If you pick him over me again, don't expect me to stay. Dad didn't follow us out, just watched from the kitchen as I slung my bag over my shoulder and headed for the door. Soren right behind me. The snow crunched underfoot, the air biting but clean, washing away the weight of that house with every step. I slid into the driver's seat, Soren buckling in beside me, and as I turned the key, something loosened in my chest, a knot I hadn't even known was there. For the first time in days, maybe months, I felt free, like I'd finally claimed a piece of myself back from the wreckage. That first taste of freedom from the night before wasn't a fluke. It was a spark, and I was ready to fan it into a flame. The drive away from Asheville with Soren in the passenger seat felt like peeling off a layer of grime I'd been carrying too long. I didn't look back, not at the house, not at the snow-dusted porch where I'd sat broken just days ago. The road stretched out ahead, open and quiet, and with every mile, the weight on my shoulders lightened, like I was shedding an old skin I'd outgrown. Back in Charlotte, I didn't waste time wallowing. I dropped my suitcase in my apartment, kicked off my boots and grabbed my laptop, fingers itching to do something bold. I'd been lurking on Reddit for years, soaking up other people's drama, but now it was my turn to spill. I typed it all out: the Christmas crash, Ezra's slimy game, Mom and Dad's blind loyalty, the recording that finally cracked it open. I hit post, my heart thumping as the words went live, titled "My Ex Hijacked My Family's Christmas." So I took it back. It felt like cutting the last chain holding me down and stepping into the light, raw but unapologetic. The responses flooded in, hundreds then thousands, piling up faster than I could scroll. Strangers from every corner of the internet chimed in with fire emojis, NTA verdicts, and stories of their own toxic exes and spineless families. You're a legend, one comment read. Screw them, you've got this, said another. I leaned back on the couch, a grin tugging at my lips as I read, the validation washing over me like a tide. Soren peeked over my shoulder, snorting at some of the spicier replies. Told you people would get it, he said, flopping beside me with a bag of chips he'd raided from my pantry. But the high didn't last long unchallenged. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number lighting up the screen. You'll regret this, Tatum. I'm not done. I didn't need a name to know it was Ezra. His venom seeped through every letter, predictable as clockwork. My stomach twisted for a second, an old reflex, but I shook it off, my thumb hovering over the block button. Not this time, I muttered, pressing down hard, the message vanishing like smoke in the wind. He was a ghost now, and I wasn't letting him haunt me anymore. Chew ahead, the real test came when Mom called. I let it ring twice, debating, then picked up, bracing myself. Her voice came through shaky, wet with tears. Tatum, please come home. I can't lose you over this. I closed my eyes, the plea tugging at me, but I'd already drawn my line. I'm not lost, Mom, I said, calm but unyielding. I'm just done being the one who bends. You made your choice, I'm making mine. She sobbed harder, begging, but I ended the call, my hand steady as I set the phone down. It hurt, sure, but it was a clean break, not a jagged tear. Soren watched me from the couch, crunching on a chip, his eyes sharp but kind. You good? He asked, brushing crumbs off his shirt. I nodded, feeling the truth of it settle in. Yeah, better than good. He smirked, tossing me the bag. Then let's plan our own Christmas, none of that Asheville crap. Just us, pizza, maybe a tree if we're feeling fancy. I caught the chips, laughing, a real unguarded sound that felt foreign but right. Add some bad movies and you've got a deal. We spent the next hour tossing ideas back and forth, pepperoni or extra cheese, Die Hard or Elf, the kind of nonsense that shouldn't matter but did because it was ours. The apartment hummed with a warmth that had nothing to do with the heater, a quiet promise of something new taking root. My phone stayed silent after that. No more pleas or threats, just the soft ping of Reddit notifications piling up. I glanced at the screen one last time, the upvotes ticking higher, and let out a slow breath. This wasn't just an ending, it was a beginning, one I'd fought for. I leaned back, whispering to myself, I deserve better than that mess. And for once I believed it.